Life is the everyday.
Life is finding joy in the mundane.
Life is making choice and be the person you want and you can't regret it.
Life is a way to achieve goals such as having the perfect career.
Life is taking pleasure in the little things.
I think life might be have a sense about what's happening in the life of the other people, even in the animals.
Life is a way to accomplish our goals.
Life is watching the sun set on another day.
Joining us here, you're so welcome. For anyone who isn't aware what FOMO is, this is a week ran by Queen's Christian Union, where we're going to explore if there's more to life, if you're missing out on something, specifically if Jesus is really where we find freedom, satisfaction, love, life, and hope. Last night's theme was love, and tonight we're going to be considering if true life can be found in Jesus. All through this week, we've been releasing videos on Facebook and Instagram of Michael Ott's tackling some big questions. And tonight we've asked the question, what can I contribute to life that death won't rob? Here's a quick teaser for anyone who missed it.
What can I contribute to life that death won't rob? So given the fact that we're all going to die someday, somehow, why don't we ever evaluate our life in the light of it? But what if this life is not all there is? What if there is something more than this life? Well, of course, that's what many religions teach. They speak of paradise or some other dimension that we might go to. And that might give us comfort in the face of death. But what difference does that make to our life now? But actually, Christianity says something radically different and completely unique.
So if you haven't watched that video yet, please make sure to check it out after the live stream on either our Facebook or Instagram pages. So earlier in the week, we had local singer-songwriter Rianne record a couple of songs for us, and tonight she's going to be singing one about life.
Hi, I'm Rianne Brownlow, and I'm going to play a song for you. It's called Older by Ben Platt, and this is a song about life and how when you're younger, you wish you're older. And when you're older, you wish time would just slow down, and it's just about stopping and appreciating what you have right now. So here we go. I was walking down 57th Street towards Park with the same old song in my same old heart, making plans I'm gonna do when I get older. Past a gray-haired man and I found his eyes. It's like he knew my thoughts and he read my mind, saying life is gonna find you when it's supposed to. Felt my feet stop short as I turned my head, try to lean into every word he said. Then he said, when you are younger, you wish you're older. Then when you're older, you wish for time to turn around. Don't let your wonder turn into closure. When you get older, when you get older. Have I killed my thoughts right before their prime? Have I bit my tongue one too many times? Have I said it all the way I really meant to? If I wait till my tomorrow comes, is the waiting all I've ever done? And will I get to know wish you're older. Then when you're older, you wish for time to turn around. Don't let your wonder turn into closure. When you get older, when you get older.
Thank you so much for that, Rianne. So tonight we're going to be thinking about missing out on life. And is Jesus the only place where we can find life to the full? So our speaker, Mark, is going to come back and talk to us a bit about that now. Hi, Mark.
Hey
there. So Mark's been with us all week, but just for anyone who maybe hasn't been here, do you want to tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from and what you do?
Sure. Yes, my name is Mark. I'm married to Joanne, and we have 3 children who are students. I'm from Scotland originally. I studied at Glasgow University, and I work with Christian unions with students across the island of Ireland.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. So maybe any of you at home, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Mark or Michael, who was in the video earlier tonight, we have a way for you to do that. So we've got a Q&A set up on Slido. So if you have any questions, you can ask them anonymously on slido.com and use the code FOMO2021, and you can get your questions answered later on in the Q&A. So now I'm just going to hand over to you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Emma. Well, this is FOMO week, and as Emma said, we've been looking at missing out on freedom, missing out on satisfaction, missing out on love, and tonight we're looking at missing out on life. Missing out on life, the universe and everything, that is not a small topic. So let me approach this with a different question for you. What did you want to be when you were 4 years old? A fireman? A pilot? A policeman? A princess? Gandalf? What did you want to be when you were 4? I mentioned that I studied at Glasgow University. Well, at university, I studied accountancy, and then I worked as an accountant for 4 years. No one aged 4 years old dreams of being an accountant. What about you? What would your 4-year-old self say to you now? Say about your life now? I mean, why are you studying what you're studying? What will you do after uni? Will you get the job of your dreams? Will you get the bank balance, the Ferrari, the home, the family of your dreams? Will you get the body of your dreams? Will you travel or have the adventures of your dreams? Will you be in a relationship of your dreams? What would your 4-year-old self say to you now? Are you on track for a good life? Or turn the clock forward to your 84-year-old self. Imagine when you're 84, like in that song, looking back on life. Will you ask the question, did you make a good use of your life? Did you make the most of your life? Well, what is life all about anyway? Jesus tells a story about a man who had a great life. So picture the scene, says Jesus. He's a rich man. He's got good land. He's got great land. It produces great crops. And year after year, there are bountiful harvests. And the Massey Fergusons drive up with load after load of grain. And the man looks at the harvest, and he looks at his barns, and he says, I've got a problem. My barns are too small. I've got too much stuff. Where am I going to put it? And then he thinks to himself, I know. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rip down those barns and build bigger barns. I'm going to rip down those grain silos. I'm going to build bigger silos. Brilliant. And I'm going to say to myself tonight, boom, you've done it. You're rich. You're loaded. You have tons laid up for many years. So relax. Eat, drink, and be merry. You've enough stuff for a good life now. You have enough stuff for a good life in the future. So enjoy. Eat, drink, and be merry. And let me pause there and just say that this is the kind of life that I would like. This man is successful. He has a career that's worked for him. This man is rich. He's got enough stashed away for years or decades to come. And this man is happy. He's about to eat, drink, and be merry. Now that's a life, isn't it? You know, find something you're good at, a career you enjoy. That's got to feel good. And then have enough money to enjoy buying stuff or doing stuff. Have enough money to enjoy life now and in the future. You wouldn't have to worry about a post-COVID recession. And then have fun. Eat, drink, and be merry. You know, kiss beans on toast goodbye. That was the student life. Welcome steaks and lashings of Schlur for the rest of your life. It sounds like a good life. And I think I know what you're thinking. I'm going to guess what you're thinking, and that is, Jesus tells this story because he's not going to like it. I mean, what will Jesus say to this rich man? I know what Jesus is going to say. He's going to say, I don't like it. Jesus, isn't he the one who's always about wearing ugly clothes and brown sandals? And Jesus wasn't rich. He didn't seem to like rich people. Didn't he tell one rich man to sell all he had and give it away? I mean, Christians hate all that stuff. They don't like you having fun. And if you've got stuff, you're not supposed to enjoy stuff. And Christians who've got stuff, well, they just should feel guilty about the stuff they've got. Isn't that what Jesus will say? And if you think that's what Jesus is like, if you think that's what God is like, then you don't know God. You don't know the God of the Bible. You don't know what Jesus is really like. Because in the Bible, we find that God is the God who made stuff for us to enjoy and who wants us to enjoy what he gives us. And in this story, Jesus doesn't tell this man to give it all away. Because life in the Bible was never meant to be gray or beige or two-dimensional or boring or monochrome. You know, life for a Christian is not all misery and grit your teeth until one day you get to heaven, whatever that is. No. Because God is a good God and a good Father, and he gives good things for us to enjoy. I mean, I'm a father, and when my children were small, if I buy them an ice cream, I want them to enjoy the ice cream. I want them to lick the life out of that ice cream cone. You know, I do not want them to eat ice cream out of duty. Who eats ice cream out of duty? No, if I take my kids to Morelli's, I want them to be happy. So too with God, who's a father. He's a father who gives good gifts. No, the problem is not a stingy God. The problem is us. God is a generous God, a giving God, an abundant God, an overflowing God. The problem is not a stingy God. The problem is us. The problem is that, like the man in this story that Jesus tells, we want stuff, but we don't want the God who gives us stuff. We'd be like my kids taking that ice cream and they're not speaking to me for the rest of the day. But that's what we're like. We want stuff, but we don't want the God who gives us stuff. And so we make our plans and we live our lives, but we ignore the God who gave us life. And so like this man, we say to ourselves, I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you've enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But this is how Jesus finishes the story. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? God calls him a fool, which is a surprise because he's obviously not stupid. This man has played the game of life and come out on top. He was the guy who knew to buy Tesla shares to invest in Bitcoin before anybody else had heard of them. This man is not stupid. He is not an idiot. But God calls him a fool. Why? Well, that word fool comes up quite a bit in the scriptures that they had back in Jesus' day, in what we now have as the first half of the Bible, in the Old Testament. And in that, a fool is someone who is short-sighted. It is someone who does stuff today without thinking about tomorrow. You know, a fool is someone who spends all their cash on the new iPhone 12 and doesn't have any money for lunch tomorrow. Or a fool would be like, it would be foolish, if you like, for a 4-year-old to be so busy licking their ice cream cone that all they can see is the ice cream and they step off the pavement onto a busy rush hour traffic. A fool is short-sighted, lives for today, ignores tomorrow. And in this story, a fool is someone who forgets that this life is not all there is. A fool forgets that this life won't go on forever. And a fool forgets that God gives life and gives good things to enjoy, but God allows death. And a fool forgets that this life is not all there is. This life is not all there is, and death is not the end of the story. And so Jesus finishes the story like this. Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. That's what a fool is in God's eyes. You've all the stuff, but no relationship with God. You're rich towards yourself, but not rich towards God. Not in a relationship with the God who gave you life, and who gave you brown eyes and red hair, and who gave you those parents and these friends, and who gave you sport and music and blueberry muffins, and who gave you the brains and the ability to get the grades to get into Queen's, who gave you all these things. He gave them to you. You've got them, but you don't have him. He gave you so many things, and he made you to enjoy those things in his presence. He made you to enjoy what he gave you in relationship with him. But we've taken stuff, and we don't want the God who gives it. We've enjoyed stuff, but we've said, stuff you to God. And let me pause. I don't know, have you ever said stuff you to God? Rejected him, shaking your fists at him? Maybe. But I think for most of us, maybe not so much. For most of us, we don't. It's not that we've really shaken our fists at God and rejected him. It's just that we don't think about God very much. It's just that he's irrelevant. We basically just ignore him. And day in, day out, we get on with life and we simply tune God out. And you might wonder, well, what's so bad about that? But think about Instagram or Facebook. We know that being rejected hurts, doesn't it? But so does being ignored. What does it feel like when all your friends all comment on each other's posts, but no one says anything about yours? No likes, no views, no comments, just nothing. What does it feel like when you're the one person shut out from the group, just quietly ignored day in, day out? Doesn't that hurt? It's not okay, is it? That there is a broken relationship there. You know, when everything you post gets ignored by your friends, there is a broken relationship there. And so too with us and God. He gave me life. He gave me good things, and my ignoring him matters. It is not okay. There is a broken relationship there. It is shameful. And you see, I may never say it out loud, but my life shows, or my life says, God, I don't want you in my life. In other words, my life shows whether I want him. And day in, day out, in small things, in everyday life, I'm saying, I will live my life my way. God, I don't want you in my life. And Jesus would say, you fool. Especially when you think about how good God is to you. You're a fool because this life is not all there is. You see, because here's the thing about the God who made you. He values you too much to only give you this life. You don't fizzle out like batteries in a child's toy after 60 or 70 years. You are worth far more than that. You matter to God far, far more than that. And that's partly why death is such a big deal for us. Because death is wrong. You weren't made to die. That is, the Bible never says that death is natural or death is okay, because it's not. And you matter more to God than that. You are more valuable to him than a single-use plastic bottle. And God didn't make you just to discard you. God is not careless with you. And Jesus is saying, this life is not all there is. Death is not the end of your story. You don't cease when you die. But your life shows whether or not you want him. And Jesus says you matter more to him than you can imagine. But how you live today echoes in eternity. In other words, your choices today matter. And Jesus says if you live as a fool today, that matters for eternity. But if you live in relationship with God today, that matters for eternity. Because God is eternal, and he's put eternity in our hearts. And how you live today echoes in eternity. So, you see, if you don't want him in your life now, he will ultimately accept your decision, and you won't have him then. Because for all eternity, you will either live in relationship with God, with a good God who made you, or you will live out of relationship with him. That is, you'll either live close to this good God who gave you life, who gave you stuff to enjoy with him. You'll either live with him, not floating on clouds or singing 24/7, but walking physically on this earth, enjoying a meal with Jesus, on this earth, renewed, made good once again, with all evil and suffering wiped out, every tear wiped away. You'll either live in relationship with him forever, or you will live out of relationship with him. And that's what Jesus calls hell. That is a place where people are, but all God's goodness is removed. Every good thing in life is removed. A place where people are, but where there's no love, no joy, no friendship, just loneliness. No fulfilling career, just frustration. No good stuff to enjoy, just stuff that turns to ashes in your mouth. This life is not all there is. But you get to choose tonight, because how you live today echoes in eternity. And the question is, what will you choose? And by the way, sitting on the fence is a choice. It is choosing to live without him. Sitting on the fence is just another way of keeping God at arm's length. I mean, you're still ignoring him, although you're pretending to be interested. And you see, life is such a precious gift from God, such a wonderful thing, that death is not the end of your story, because you were made for more. You matter too much to God for that. You matter too much for him to be careless with you or to treat you as if you were disposable. And I think deep down we sense that. We know we were made for more than this life, and that death is wrong. And how you live today echoes in eternity, and you get to choose. And what you choose determines how you will live for eternity. So let me finish with one final question. Jesus says I should be in a rich relationship with God. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean? How can I be rich towards God? How can you be rich towards someone who has everything? How can you be rich towards him? How can you give anything to God, the God who made the galaxies and sunsets and oranges and squirrels and electricity? He made all these things. What do you give to the God who has everything? And the answer is, you can't. Instead, he gives everything to you. He did everything for you. And that is why Jesus came. Let me recap for a second. What's our problem? I've been saying our problem is that we ignore God. We've turned away from God. We've rejected God. What happens when Jesus dies on the cross? He was rejected by God. Not just ignored, but cut off. And on the cross, Jesus cries out, "My God, no longer my Father, but my God, why have you forsaken me?" And his relationship with God, his Father, was broken. In other words, Jesus went through hell for you. But that is why Jesus came. That is why he died. He took your place. And he experienced that broken relationship with God, his Father, so that you never have to. And you get to choose today, because if you want him, he's yours. Because Jesus loves you so much that he would rather die than be without him. He would rather die than be without you. And if you want him, tonight, he's yours. What do you give to the God who has everything? Nothing. Instead, he gave everything for you. He did everything for you, and he's waiting for you to turn towards him. He's waiting for you to want a relationship with him. His arms are open wide. So do you want him? Because if you want him, he's yours. And what you do tonight echoes in eternity. This life is not all there is. But if you walk with Jesus today, you will walk with him for all eternity. With someone who loves you so much that they would rather die than be without you. And the only question is, do you want him? Well, you may have some questions. Emma gave us the link for that Slido. Please do put up any questions you have. And while you're thinking of questions, let me just say very briefly that the best answers to your questions, to all questions, will always be in seeing Jesus himself. And the best thing you can do this week is read this. It's called Uncover Mark. It's one of the biographies of Jesus' life. You can read it online at uncover.org.uk. But tomorrow, people will be standing outside DV halls between 1 and 3 handing out copies. Get one. Read it with a friend. Ask your questions. But either way, this week, don't miss out. Don't miss a wonderful opportunity to find out how to live a life that matters for all eternity, and how to live in relationship with the one who loves you so much that they would rather die than be without you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Mark. Remember, just like Mark was saying, if any of you have any questions that you would like answered tonight, just send them into our Q&A using slido.com and using the code FOMO 2021. So over the past few weeks, in the lead up to FOMO Belfast, we've been releasing student stories on our Facebook and our Instagram of different people telling their story of how Jesus has changed their life. And tonight, we have another story for you. So unfortunately, Erin couldn't be with us here in person, but I got speaking to her on Zoom earlier on in the week. Hey Erin, would you like to tell us a bit about who you are, about what you do?
Okay, so I'm Erin, and I am in second year in Bible college and studying a degree in theology.
That's great. And can you just tell us a bit more about your life before Jesus and just how that compares to your life now with Jesus?
Yeah, well, I became a Christian whenever I was 15, which in comparison to some people is quite young. But before that time, I was like in a really weird and kind of awful place. So my mum and my dad divorced whenever I was like 4, and I had never really thought of that as like a big thing, and it had never really affected me until I became like a teenager, and whenever I was like coming into my teenage years, my stepdad then walked out of my family after like 11 years of him being in our lives. And on top of that, I wasn't really fitting in school. And I used to try and avoid my family because of the amount of hurt that I was like suppressing because of all of these people like abandoning me. And so I used to spend most of my time in Belfast with people who really weren't like good influences on me. So by the age of 14, I was like smoking, and I was drinking and I really didn't see like any point in my life at all. And at some point then these people left me as well, and they said I wasn't good enough for them. So I ended up with not very much left at all. I didn't have relationships with friends. I had really broken relationships with my family, and I felt really, really abandoned. And this resulted in me feeling extremely low, like most of the time. And then just suddenly out of the blue, because of my cousin praying for me, I found Jesus. And although I still struggle with a lot of the things from my past, Jesus has been gentle and kind enough to like bring me through a process of healing and be really loving in the way that he brings me through that. And I learned very quickly that unlike the things of this world and unlike the people in this world, that Jesus doesn't abandon me, and Jesus doesn't abandon anyone who decides to put their trust in him. He doesn't change either, so he doesn't just decide to get up and leave one day and just leave you in the dust. And I've really found that like he's the solid rock in my life that has supported and guided me through so much, like even whenever I didn't really see him. And I honestly, like, hand on heart, would not be here without him. Like I don't even know where I'd be. And his entire life and his death and his resurrection, like, they all mean so much to me, and they have given me an abundance of things in life, which, like, more than what I ever thought I could be given, and more than what I even deserve. Yeah, like, life with him is it's not easy by any stretch. Like, there's still so much that I struggle with, but life with him is full of abundance and blessing, and it's a life that's full of love and joy. I definitely, life with him is better than life without him. So yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your story with us.
So it's time now to answer some of your questions that you sent through to the Slido. So we're joined tonight by both Mark and our speaker, Michael Otts. Michael's the guy who was in the videos which have been released on our Facebook and our Instagram throughout the week. So throughout this time, if you've got any more questions, please keep sending them through to our Slido. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. And just before we start, just for anyone who doesn't know you, do you want to tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yes, my name is Michael Ott. I live in a small town called Marlow, which is halfway between Oxford and London, just on the River Thames. Live here with my wife, Rebecca. And normally in a kind of pre-COVID world, I would be traveling quite a lot, speaking at universities, both around the UK, but also other parts of Europe as well, at weeks of events like this. But for the last year, I've spent most of my time in my spare room speaking to my computer like I'm doing tonight. So missing doing it in person, but great to be able to join you virtually at least.
Thank you, Michael. So the first question I'm actually going to throw over to you, Michael. So somebody's asking, saying that you say that God gives life and good gifts, and my life seems so hopeless and mundane. There seems to be no joy. How do I reconcile the two?
Yeah. Firstly, I'd say thank you for your honest question. And life can be like that. It's strange, isn't it? On the one hand, sometimes life can be wonderful, filled with so many good things to enjoy. On the other, it can be not only mundane, it can be painful, it can be hard, it can be tough. And how do we reconcile those two things? Well, I think what the Bible would say is that there are so many good things in this world because God created it and created it for us to enjoy as a gift. But there's so much that's wrong about our world because our world's out of step with the God who created it. Our world's not the way it once was. And wonderfully, it's not the way it one day will be when God puts it right in the future. So we live in a good world that's gone wrong. And that kind of matches up with my experience of life. My experience of life is not that everything is wonderful, because often it isn't. But neither is my experience of life that everything is awful and there's nothing good. Because actually there are wonderfully good things to enjoy and to appreciate, even in the midst of all the mess, and even in the midst of the last year, with all its craziness. And so there's a mixture, isn't there? And And actually, the wonderful thing the Bible says is one day God's going to redeem and restore this world, get rid of the stuff that ruins it, and make it new, and we can be part of that. But even now, there are still things that we can enjoy. And I think one of the things that coming to know God does is it helps us continue and get through when times are tough, because God is with us. But it also enhances our experiences of joy when life is good, because we live it in relationship with God. And I think sometimes that means that we have eyes to see things that maybe we haven't always seen. One thing that my wife and I have tried to do during lockdown 3, which is 3 lockdowns more than either of us would have wanted, is to just have a kind of attitude of gratitude that says, okay, there's a lot of stuff we wouldn't choose to have right now in our lives, but what are the things that we can be thankful for? And when you start to list them, you think, actually, even in the midst of this, with all its confusion and uncertainty, there's so many things on any day that we can give thanks for. But the question is, do we focus on that or just the frustrations? Don't ignore the frustrations, but also don't ignore the good things either.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michael. So Mark, now one for you. So somebody's asking, how can I choose God? The idea of him sounds nice, but it all seems so far stretched and too much like a fairy tale.
Brilliant 2-part question. Let me answer the second part first. It all sounds too far-fetched, too much like a fairy tale. There's a reason why fairy tales catch our hearts, and that is that they have a happily ever after. And the reason why that catches us is actually the fairy tale is not wrong. It is a reflection of reality. You know, when you become a teenager, you become as ancient as me, you start to think all of life is miserable and it's all going to end in darkness. But the reality that the Bible says, and that we've been trying to look at during this week, the reality that the fairy tale tells you is that there is a happily ever after. So it's quite, we doubt that. We doubt that in our cynical world. We think it's all going to end in darkness and death is just the end of the story and there's nothing else. But actually the Bible says true reality, the fairy tale's got it more right than you imagine. And if you want to find out more about that, then do pick up a copy of Uncovered. Do get a copy of that and find out what Jesus has to say about that. See what your friends, they can help you look at what the Bible has to say about that, what God has to say about that. So it may feel too good to be true, but actually that's the reality. And if you're ignoring that, you're missing out on something wonderful. But the first part of the question also was, how do I choose God? Was that right? How do I choose? That was a very good question. In the simplest sense, it's of a child coming to a father. You don't have to have all the right words. You don't have to have a formula. And in fact, the easiest thing is to think about words that you learned before you even went to school, which are please and thank you and sorry. And all from what I've been talking about tonight, all you do is and when I say pray, you're speaking to God in your heart or out loud, saying, I'm sorry that I've lived in your world but ignored you. I'm sorry that I've lived as if you weren't there. Thank you that Jesus died on the cross. Thank you that his relationship with you was broken so that mine could be restored. And please help me to know that I am now your child. And prayer is simply speaking. It's simply speaking to a father. And if you have small children, or if you have small children in your family, I should say, or nephews and nieces, you will know that small children just gabble stuff out. And how you choose God is you simply speak to him, speak your heart. And if he's there, ask him to help you to express that to him. But that's how you choose him. But the happily ever after is the true story.
Thank you, Mark. Michael, just another one for you. Somebody's asking, if God created all life, why not create everyone a Christian?
God created all life, why not just create everyone Christian? I guess it depends what you mean by Christian. Often when we think of kind of a religious system, we think of something that, maybe you're born into, maybe you just adopt. But ultimately what we've been trying to say this week is to be a Christian is to have a relationship with God. It's to be connected in a real and personal way to the God who's made you through Jesus and what he's done for us. So if being a Christian means having a relationship, then that's not something that God can force upon us, because no relationship can be forced upon the other. They have to be freely chosen by both parties. Now, the wonderful thing is, in spite of the fact that we've often said no to God, he still wants to say yes to us, and he's done that in Jesus. But he can't force that upon us. but he gives us the choice. He gives everyone the choice. And we can respond to that love or we can reject it. And there are consequences, wonderful or terrible either way. So I'd say God couldn't make people Christian, because actually they wouldn't be Christian in the sense of having a relationship with God. You can't make someone have a relationship. But what you can do is you can show love. It's a bit like, if you want to love someone else or you want to get into a relationship with someone else, you don't twist their arm around their back, stick a gun to their head and say, love me, because that wouldn't be love. But you can do loving things that would hopefully cause them to notice you and potentially love you back. And in the same way, God has shown his love to us in Jesus, and it's our choice as to what we will do with that. And wonderfully, I'd just also say, we often think, Christianity is this white Western middle class thing, but actually, where is the Christian church growing most rapidly today? It's in places like Nepal and Algeria and Iran. All of these countries that wouldn't traditionally in our minds be considered Christian countries, but literally thousands, millions in the case of China, coming to faith in Jesus. Not born into a Christian family, but choosing to opt into this relationship with God. And I just say, don't miss out. If you've not done that yourself, make sure you do.
And sort of leading on from that, Michael, somebody else has asked, why could God not just have created a world without death?
Why did God not create a world without death? Well, I'd say actually he did. According to the Bible storyline, in the first chapters of the Bible, we see that death was not part of God's world in the way that it was originally created. God is the source of life, and he poured his life, as it were, into his creation. And what the Bible says is that when humanity decided to cut itself off from God, that's when death came into the world. And there's kind of an obvious reason for that, isn't there? If God is the source of life, if we cut ourselves off from him, then ultimately cut off from the source of life, we cannot carry on living indefinitely. It's like if I pull out my phone from the plug, it's going to run dry at some point. It needs to be connected to the source for it to keep on going. So we need to be connected to the source of life. We're disconnected. And the Bible talks about death in different ways. It talks about physical death, but it also talks about spiritual death, this being disconnected from God. And we can experience that now, even though we haven't yet experienced physical death in our bodies. And wonderfully, Jesus came to experience the death that we deserve, physically, as he died on the cross. But more than that, spiritually, as he experienced the separation from God the Father as he died, so that we can have that death defeated. Jesus is the Death Eater who's come to destroy it. And yes, God created a world without death. It is part of our world, and that grieves God. And when we look at the stories of Jesus, he weeps when he sees the reality of death and the pain that brings. But wonderfully, if we know and trust Jesus, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. Jesus says, he who believes in me, even though he dies, he will yet live, which is a wonderful promise that one day death is going to be a thing of history.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. So Mark, another one for you. Somebody else is saying, I'm already happy in life, so why do I need Jesus?
That's great you're happy. I think that's wonderful. Part of what we're looking at is that, as Michael was saying, you have good days, you have bad days. Things go up and down. If your happiness is solely based on you and your abilities and your circumstances, you are more vulnerable to things going up and down, to illness coming, to redundancy, to relationship breakdown. If you like, there's no foundation underneath that gives you more of a stability there. And I think for me in this example, the fact that I know Jesus and he knows me means that there is something foundational, there's a foundational solidity to my life that means I'm not swung up and down when I'm happy or when I'm crushed, because he's always with me. But the second part of the answer to that is, I said a moment ago that the fairy tale is true, there is a happily ever after. You might be happy now, but you don't know what you're missing out on. If I think about my 4-year-old child, the illustration I gave of giving them an ice cream and they enjoy ice cream. If I were to say one day, if I were to say to my son, one day you will find the girl of your dreams, you will love her and just want to spend time with her, he would have gone running off to want to play football. That's just something he can't imagine. He can't imagine what love and what marriage and relationship like that will look like or feel like. In a similar way, he might be happy at eating ice cream, but he doesn't know the joys of a marriage relationship that he's going to miss out on because he's only 4. And in one sense, too, we're limited. We don't know what we're missing out on. So I'm glad you're happy. As I say, things go up and down. Something may happen tomorrow. I don't mean to be miserable. But I think even in this life, knowing Jesus gives you a foundational solidity and a stability. But also, you don't know what you're missing out on. It's a bit like a 4-year-old licking ice cream and not knowing what it is to be in a relationship with someone who loves you and you love them for the rest of your life. So I would say explore, find out more of what it is to actually walk with Jesus, not just into this life, but into the life to come as well.
Thanks, Mark. And sort of even leading on from that, a more personal question. So has God ever revealed himself to you? Has he shown you that he is there and that he is real?
Has God ever revealed himself to me, shown me that he is there and that he is real? Yes, he has, but not perhaps in the way that you might be asking that question. In other words, I haven't had a vision, I haven't had an appearance like that. But I think that what happens is that over the course of life, you realize that this is not just a fiction. This is not just me speaking into the clouds. There is actually a relationship with someone who knows me and who speaks back. An illustration of this would be that I mentioned that I've been married. I'm married to Joanne. We've been married for 25 years. When we first started going out, I was living in Singapore, and she was living back here in the UK. And we were 6,000 miles apart. And this is 25 years ago, and we certainly didn't have mobile phones. And we actually started going out by writing letters to each other. And at that stage, would I rather have been married? Yes. Would I rather have been with Joanne? Yes. Is it better now being with Joanne than it was in those days of writing letters and being engaged? Yes, it is. But even in those days, those letters were not nothing. We treasured them. We moved house 2 weeks ago, and I have those letters still in the attic, in the roof space. Because the relationship was real, even though it wasn't the same as being with the person. So what I have now is far, far better. What I will have with Jesus one day is far, far better. But that doesn't mean I have nothing now. I do have a real relationship with him, but I know it will be better when I see him face to face. But that doesn't mean it's nothing now.
Thank you so much. Michael, another one for you. So what are the day-to-day differences of doing life with Jesus?
That's a great question. How does it make a difference to your life each day? Because I guess maybe you're kind of watching this week and you're saying, well, that's all nice in theory, but like, what does that look like tomorrow? In a sense, what I would say is I cannot tell you, it will mean exactly this or exactly that, because if being a Christian is having a relationship with God, then relationships are organic, aren't they? If you say, what difference does it make being married? Well, it makes all sorts of differences, but it depends on the day and the week and the situation as to exactly what the difference is. But the difference is, I would say, I have a relationship with God. That means that actually I try to start my day by reconnecting, as it were, with God. I spend some time reading the Bible because I believe that it's not just a historical book. It is a historical book. It does give us history, but it also is a living book. God can speak to me through it, and it reminds me of who God is, who I am, his love for me, his promises for me. I try and pray each day, just praying about the stuff that's going to happen, the stuff that's coming up, the stuff that I'm happy about, the stuff that I'm worried about, and bring him into the day. And then as I go through the day, I'm just trying to think, actually, how can I live this day in a way that I love God and love other people? And to put that into practice. It's an adventure, it's a journey from day to day. And sometimes I'll get it wrong. I'll make mistakes and I'll blow it. And the wonderful thing is I can come back to this God and say, God, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. And the wonderful thing is, because my relationship with him is not dependent on me being good enough, but what Jesus has done for me, I can know his forgiveness. I don't have to, he's not a God who says, well, I'm sorry you blew it today, but if you do really well tomorrow, I might think about listening to you again. No, he instantly forgives me and restores me. So it's a relationship that I need to keep coming back to God in. And then at the end of the day, I just try and sit and thank God for the things that he has sent me. And as I said earlier, in even the worst of days, there are still some things to thank God for, but also to pray about the things that have concerned me through the day. And the great thing is I can put my head on the pillow at night, and all those things that I'm worried about, I can put them in God's hands and just say, God, well, I got to sleep, so you can worry about them now. So that's a little bit what it looks like, I guess, to have a relationship. And it's an adventure, and it's being open to to how that relationship might grow.
Thanks. And this is the last question that we have. So, Michael, when making decisions over time, humans tend to prioritize the present. So somebody's asking, how can we reconcile this pressure to indulge in pleasure now at the expense of eternity?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess, in a sense we do, don't we? To an extent, in all sorts of areas of life. Do I snack on those crisps now, or do I wait for dinner? Do I get myself out of bed and go for a cycle ride, or do I have another kind of hours, lie-in? And there are all sorts of decisions where we have to make a decision about, what am I going to do? And often the temptation is in life to prioritize what makes me happy in this moment, not what I will be glad that I did in an hour, a day, a week, or a month's time. And yet so often in life, it's when we actually do the counterintuitive thing that we look back with gratitude, don't we? I look back and say, I'm really glad I actually got myself out of bed and pushed my body to do some exercise because I feel better for it. I'm really glad I didn't snack my way through the afternoon because I've appreciated my dinner more. These are silly kind of temporal illustrations, but they show the reality of the principle, don't they? That if we can defer our sense of enjoyment, actually that will be good for us. In fact, psychologists discovered this. There were some psychological experiments that were done a number of years ago. If you study psychology, you'll probably have come across them, where children were asked, or given a choice. You can eat one sweet now, I think it was one sweet, but if you wait for, I can't remember the length of time it was, probably wasn't that long for a kid, but if you wait for a certain length of time and don't eat the one sweet, you'll get two sweets. And some children couldn't wait and they just had the one then. Some children did wait and were disciplined and then they had the two. What they did though is that years later, once these children had grown up and become teenagers, gone into adulthood, they compared these different individuals and they recognized that actually those who were able to defer enjoyments, who were patient enough to be able to say, actually, I'm going to defer that and have something better in the future, did better in life in all sorts of different metrics of determining success than those who just wanted it now. And I'm not surprised by that because that seems to fit with what the Bible tells us, that actually God has created us for pleasure and joy, but sometimes actually the shape of the Christian message is the cross before the resurrection. And it wasn't just that for Jesus, he died and then rose to life. Often actually it's the shape of the Christian life. That actually we die to ourselves, we die to our desires, we die to those temporal desires, but actually we find on the other side a life that we didn't expect, a joy that we just didn't think was going to come. So I would say that is the kind of counterintuitive nature of the Christian faith. But also actually I would say in a sense we do that all the time, don't we, in different ways. Why do you continue to study? I was going to say go to your lectures, but I guess most of you don't go to lectures. But why do you keep logging on to your lectures? Well, I guess there's the hope that at the end of your time, you will get a degree and the hope that that will get you a job and so on. We're always making decisions based on the future, aren't we? And so often we realize that we have to do the hard stuff now because we know there's joy to come. I just say, look, if this life is not all there is, and the resurrection of Jesus tells me it isn't all there is because there is something beyond death, then actually I would be a fool to, as we heard tonight in that story from Jesus, I'd be a fool to live my life as if this is all that counts. And it'd be much wiser to take into account, actually, there's a whole lot more to the story, and then start to make decisions in life based on that. But yeah, I just come back to say, some of Jesus' words on that. He says, those who want to save their lives will lose it, but those who lose their lives for me will find it. It is counterintuitive Christianity. It might, you might be thinking like, oh, you know what, to become a Christian it would just feel like giving up everything that's good in life. It would feel like death. And Jesus says, yeah, it feels like that. But on the other side, you find life, a life that you didn't expect. And C.S. Lewis, when he wrote his biography of his life, he called it Surprised by Joy. And he did that for a couple of reasons. One, because his wife was called Joy and he was surprised to meet her. But also because as an atheist, he didn't want to become a Christian because he thought it was going to be the end of life. But then he says, I was surprised by the joy that I found as a Christian. I was a reluctant convert, to use his words. But once I trusted Jesus, I discovered this life that I didn't expect. So all I'd say is check it out. And as Mark mentioned earlier, if you've not yet got one of those copies of Uncover, the best thing to do is come down tomorrow lunchtime, pick up your free copy and start reading that for yourself. But more than that, get in touch with the person who maybe told you about this event or whose Facebook feed shared it with you and say, I'd like to chat to you about it. And maybe you can meet up, go for a walk, sit on that park bench and discuss the things that you're reading. But do look into this. If what we said tonight has even just a chance of being true, it would be worth looking into more. And we kind of want to say, actually, there's more than a chance it's true. We really think it really is objectively true and worth checking out.
Thank you, Michael. So that's all we have time for tonight. But if any of you watching have any more questions which you would like answered, Mark is going to run next door in a second and Michael's going to be there on Zoom. And you can continue to ask some more questions, maybe that you have from the talk or from some of the student stories or some of the videos that you've seen this week. And you can get your questions answered there. So the Zoom link will be down below in the comments section. So yeah, thank you so much for everybody watching. Thank you so much for Mark and Michael for coming to talk to us. And tomorrow night we'll be back, same time, same place, and we're going to be considering Don't Miss Out on Hope. So Michael tomorrow will be asking the question, how can I find security in an uncertain world? And then we'll be back here tomorrow night at 7:30 on Facebook and YouTube, thinking about how we can't miss out on hope. So also for any international students or just anybody who's interested in general, tomorrow at 1 o'clock at lunchtime, we have another event on Zoom with the international speaker Peter Teagle. And this week's international speaker will be having a Q&A session tomorrow at 1. So please feel free to come along to that as well. So if you'd like to know more about tonight's talk, you can also connect with us or get in touch with Mark or Michael personally by following the link in the description and going to the FOMO website. So if you want to know more, then just scroll down the FOMO website and click on the link Want to Know More, and we'd really love to hear from you. Thank you.
Life is the everyday.
Life is finding joy in the mundane.
Life is making choice and be the person you want and you can't regret it.
Life is a way to achieve goals such as having the perfect career.
Life is taking pleasure in the little things.
I think life might be have a sense about what's happening in the life of the other people, even in the animals.
Life is a way to accomplish our goals.
Life is watching the sun set on another day.